morning. As part of our outreach speaker series, today we're joined by Simone Cornelissen. She's Manager of Community Engagement and Fund Development for Juliette's Place. Simone's a registered social worker and has been in the social service and the violence against women sector for the past 20 years. Simone believes in empowering women and children to succeed. She's passionate about giving back to the community and volunteers with Big Brother and Big Sister of Toronto and Girl Guides of Canada. Today, Simone will speak about types of abuse, statistics, the impact of COVID on the shelter sector, cycle of abuse, and Juliette's Place with the services they provide. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat box. Please type your questions in the chat box. At the completion of each module, Simone will answer questions before we continue. At the end of Simone's presentation, I'll tell you all about what Emily and I are doing to support the women at Juliet.
Great, thank you so much, Jane. Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, church family. How is everyone today? You can just kind of raise your hand saying that you're super. Wonderful. So yes, I'm Simone and I am from Juliette's Place. And I am, despite how I may look, I'm very excited to be here to speak with you about Juliette's Place and the clients that we serve. So I'm just going to share my screen. As Jane said, if you have any questions at all, please ask. I will do my best to answer them to the best of my ability. And if I don't have the answer to the question, I will definitely find it. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Yes?
Looks good.
We can? Okay, perfect. Okay. So Juliette's Place is a shelter for abused women and children. So I'm going to talk to you today about the clients we serve, types of abuse against women, the cycle of abuse, statistics on violence against women, our mission, vision, and values of Juliette's Place, a little bit of the history of the shelter, our programs and services, and how to get involved, because we definitely want the community to get involved and support Juliette's Place. Okay, so who are we? So Juliette's Place is a shelter specifically for women and their children who are fleeing domestic violence. So we actually started off in 1990 as a family shelter, but we found that there was a growing need to specifically support women and children. So we had actually changed to a violence against women shelter. And please tell me if I'm going too fast. So violence against women. So let's talk about the definition. So any act of gender-based violence that results in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or private life. Types of abuse. Okay, so I would say that most people commonly know physical abuse, but there's so many types of abuse. So physical abuse can include slapping, kicking, punching, burning, choking. So it's the non-accidental, willful infliction of physical pain or injury. Sexual abuse. Any form of sexual activity with a person without their consent. And the most important part of that is the consent. Sexual abuse may include unwanted sexual touching, sexual relations without voluntary consent, or the forcing or coercion of degrading, humiliating, or painful sexual acts. Types of abuse also include psychological, emotional, and verbal abuse. So behavior intended to control, humiliate, intimidate, or instill fear or diminish a person's sense of self-worth. Forced confinement, isolation, threats or deliberately doing things to frighten a victim. Threats to harm or kill the children, family members, or pets is also abuse. Abusers may also threaten to remove, hide, or prevent access to children. This abuse also diminishes a woman's ability to care and provide for her children and to participate in the workforce. Now, there's also economical and financial abuse, which sometimes we don't really necessarily think of. So economic or financial abuse is exerting control of the victim's financial resources without consent. So you're withholding resources and necessities of life, including food, clothing, personal care, medication, things related to the children, like children's clothing, children's diapers, their food, etc. Types of abuse, and we're commonly seeing more abuse in terms of spiritual abuse. So that may include preventing a woman from participating in spiritual or religious practices, ridiculing her beliefs. So whatever that she believes in is not real, or it's not good enough, or doesn't exist, or using spiritual beliefs to justify controlling her. So saying, this is what God would want me to do. You're not listening to me. You're not being a good person because this is what whatever Holy Scripture or Bible or Quran or any religious book is saying. We also have criminal harassment and stalking. So following her, watching her, being where you think that she might be, going to her workplace, stalking her outside. These are all types of abuse. More common now with technology is cyber violence. So cyber violence includes online threats of harassment and stalking. Young women, specifically between the ages of 18 to 24, are more likely to experience online harassment in its most severe forms, including stalking, sexual harassment, and physical threats. Okay, so before we go on to the stats, does anyone have any questions?
I don't have anything in the chat box at this time, but I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Okay. All right, I will go on. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about stats. Okay, so 50% of all women in Canada have experienced at least one incident of physical or sexual violence since the age of 16. That is a huge stat. And whether we know of women who have experienced violence or not, it is happening. 67% of Canadians say that they have personally known at least one woman who has experienced physical or sexual abuse. Women are more likely to report more severe forms of violence. They're more likely to report repeated victimization, to report being injured by a partner, report negative emotional consequences as a result of violence, experience forms of violence that came to the police attention, and they're more likely to report fear that their lives were in danger. Some more stats. 34% of women reported that they had been sexually assaulted, beaten, choked, or threatened with a gun or knife by their partner in the last 5 years. Women are at risk from former husband and boyfriends, with especially large differences in severity of the violence that they've experienced. and women are at a greater risk of being killed by a partner from whom they have been separated. And that actually ties into the story of Juliette's Place that we'll get to later on today. Now, in terms of the shelter, 3,491 women and their 2,724 children sleep at shelters because it isn't safe at home. On any given night, 300 women and children are turned away because shelters are already full. 67 out of 83 of police reported intimate partner homicides in 2014 were female. And approximately every 6 days, a woman in Canada is killed by her intimate partner. Now, to highlight some stats on Indigenous women. Indigenous women, so First Nations, Inuit, Métis, are 6 times more likely to be killed than non-Indigenous women. Indigenous women are 2.5 times more likely to be victims of violence than non-Indigenous women. There were 1,181 cases of missing or murdered Indigenous women in Canada between 1980 and 2012, according to the RCMP. However, according to grassroots organizations and the Minister of the Status of Women, the number is actually much higher, closer to the 4,000 mark. Now, other women who are at risk are older women. Older women are at a greater risk of experiencing elder abuse from a family member. It accounts for 60% of senior survivors of family violence. Immigrant women may be more vulnerable to domestic violence due to economic dependency, language barriers, and just simply not knowing what resources are available for them. Women with disabilities, so 60% of women with a disability have experienced some sort of domestic violence. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do have a question. Are the stats that you're presenting today, are they for all of Canada, for our local area? What?
They are for all of Canada.
All of Canada. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. Let's move on to the impact of COVID-19. Okay. So social isolation, loss of employment, and reduced income are all factors known to increase the risk of domestic violence, which have been prevalent in recent months. So basically, because of COVID-19, women are simply just not getting out of violent situations. More people are obviously at home, there's stay-at-home orders, there's lockdowns, people have lost their jobs, they're forced to isolate. So when there was even a glimmer of hope where a woman could take a moment to call Juliette's Place or another domestic violence shelter and say that they need support and, you know, make a plan with staff to leave, they're not able to do so with being stuck at home with the abuser. So the pandemic has led to increased stress with lockdowns. As I mentioned, families, couples are confined at home. For those experiencing violence, especially within the home, accessing help may be more difficult because of the restricted contact with networks and sources of support. So again, when they would be able to take a moment to, you know, maybe research online, women's shelters, or when they would be able to reach out for support. So maybe when they're picking up their children from school and talking to, you know, any of the schools, or if they were even going to school, or if they were able to talk to family and friends face to face, they're unfortunately not able to do so. So the Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses, OATH, stated that 20% of the 70 shelters OATH represents have had increased crisis calls. And that is very true for us at Juliette's Place. We have definitely had increased crisis calls for women who have tried to flee domestic violence, who have had that little moment where maybe the abuser has gone to the grocery store. We know the lineups are very long, so they might be out a little bit longer, or they've waited till the abuser has gone to bed, or they've taken the phone into the washroom with them to quickly try and get some support. Where risk factors of gender-based violence at home already exist, like a sense of control, possessive, jealousy, misogynistic attitudes, various pandemic-related stressors can become triggers, including job loss and reduced income, food insecurity, fears about contracting the virus, which is, of course, huge, exacerbated mental health issues, disrupted family routines, services, and resources. So just before we move on to what the cycle of abuse is, just in terms of COVID-19. So our shelter had to, of course, drastically change because of COVID-19 in adhering to the protocol and the rules and the regulations. So some of the things that we needed to change was, for example, dinner time. So we would call women and children down for dinner at 5 o'clock, and that happens every day. And we would eat as a family. Because of COVID-19, we can no longer do that. So now we have to call women and their children down by their rooms. So we would say room 1 and 2, please come down for dinner. After they come down for dinner, they finish up, then we call the next rooms. And that's, of course, to adhere to physical distancing. We've also had to change how we counsel women. So where we would be able to have one-on-one therapeutic counseling, we're doing that at a distance now. And it's very hard to counsel a woman who has fled domestic violence, who has trauma, who has triggers, and not be able to, with consent, hold her hand or give her a hug. And not being able to do that is really hard in the healing process. And of course, our programs have had to change as well, where we can't have everyone in a room doing different programming because of the physical distancing and because of the spread. So it's definitely been very tough on our women and our children. Essentially, it's kind of like being back in isolation, which is incredibly tough. Having to say to women, you've just fled a domestic violence situation, and now you're at our shelter, and now we're going to ask you very kindly to stay in your room until you're called, or until where your counseling session is happening, is very, very hard. And it's very triggering as well, because you're almost going back to essentially what you were leaving. Do we have any questions on the impact of COVID-19?
We have a couple of questions. Our first question is, what's the capacity of Juliette's Place?
Good question.
Well, you talked about room 1 and 2, for example. So what would you be looking at?
So can I hold off on that question until we get to the Juliette's Place part?
Yes. And then someone's asking what's the phone number for help, and I imagine you probably have that too.
I do.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect. All good questions, and I will get to that. So let's talk about the cycle of abuse. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the cycle of abuse. but we will get into that. So the cycle starts with tension. Okay, this is when the abuser is being passive aggressive, there's poor communication, the woman may feel like she's walking on eggshells, and nothing that she can do is going to calm the abuser down. So from tension comes the incident. So the tension has built up enough to cause an incident of abuse. It could be a verbal attack, it could be physical violence, it could be an act of spiritual abuse or financial abuse. But the abuser essentially starts blaming the victim for all negative aspects of their relationship. So because you didn't do this, this happened. And because you didn't do that, this happened. And you made me do this. And if only you would listen, none of this would happen. So really the incident part is an abuse overall is about power and control and how we exert power and control over the victim. Okay. Then we go to the reconciliation. So this is the phase where the abuser is somewhat having second thoughts. They may be afraid of the consequences. The abuser doesn't want the victim to leave them. So they might be thinking, okay, I've done this, and now she might leave me. Now she might take our children. And so the abuser starts saying, I'm sorry, and this will never happen again, and stay with me, things will change. This tends to work better if the victim has low self-esteem, because with that low self-esteem occurs the seeking of approval of others. They're more often willing to make sacrifices for other people to gain their approval. So it's that, okay, you know what, this has happened, but I believe you. I know that you're going to change. This is not going to happen again. And then there is the calm. Okay, so also known as the honeymoon phase. So this is when the abuser, starts acting happy, and this is the best relationship that we've ever had, and starts, kind of buttering up the victim. So giving, them flowers and chocolates, and, you're the best thing that's ever happened to my life, and I don't know where I'd be without you. Starts going back to things that they enjoyed in their relationship. So maybe it's going out to dinner, or, having movie nights, things like that, where they were in their honeymoon or happy periods. So there are two common things during this phase. So enjoying the calm, the victim's usually happy that the abuse has stopped, and hopefully things will be better for the future. And also self-blaming happens. So the victim can also internalize what happened before the calm. So saying things like, if I had put dinner out at 7 o'clock when they wanted it, then this wouldn't have happened. Or if I had cleaned the kitchen, then this wouldn't have happened. So taking on that blame, and not knowing that, they are not the cause of being abused. Okay. Any questions on the cycle of abuse?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you, Jane. All right, so now we're going to go on to Juliette's Place. So the mission of Homeward Family Shelter, so we started off as Homeward Family Shelter. operating as Juliette's Place, provides a safe short-term emergency shelter to women and their children fleeing violence and abuse, and helps them to build their skills through educational programs and support services. Our vision is for all women and children to have the opportunity and support to live free of violence and abuse. Our values: to demonstrate respect for all by valuing and accepting the principle of equality and the dignity of others. Act with accountability to achieve meaningful results for all of our stakeholders. Create an atmosphere of safety free of all forms of physical and emotional violence, oppression, and discrimination. Promote self-determination to ensure that all women can establish directions for their lives and the lives of their children. So the history of Juliette's Place. So Homeward Family Shelter opened its doors on June 18th, 1990. So this year, we're going to be celebrating 31 years of helping women and children flee domestic violence, which is an amazing milestone, but it's also bittersweet. It's, you know, thank God that there are places like Juliette's Place where women and children can flee. And at the same time, we wish there weren't places like Juliette's Place. So the 35-bed facility is one of the largest single shelters in operation to date. So in terms of the shelter, so we are a large house. In the house, we have 12 bedrooms. Each bedroom is configured to a different family size. So for example, we have a room that has a bed and a crib. So that would be for a mom and a baby. Whereas we have another room that would have 4 beds. So that would be for a mom and 3 children. Shortly after opening, the organization revised its mandate, as I had mentioned, to provide services to abused women and their children only. On Mother's Day weekend in 1996, Homeward Family Shelter lost an ex-resident, Juliet Reynolds. She was murdered by her estranged partner and abuser. So what I have heard about Juliet was that she was an absolutely amazing woman. She came to the shelter fleeing her husband with her 2 children. She participated in all the therapeutic programs. She went back to school. She got a job. She was really trying to live her life free from violence and raise her children in a positive and peaceful environment. Unfortunately, her ex-partner found her and he murdered her in front of their children. In 1997, the organization, so Homeward Family Shelter, sought and was granted the legal right to operate as Juliette's Place in memory of Juliet Reynolds. In 2000, the organization broke the shelter tradition and began to intake male children over the age of 16 years. So what that means is that shelters all across Ontario, all across Canada, were not allowing women to come with their adult male children, which seems really kind of silly when you think about it. But that's a barrier for women fleeing domestic violence. So if you have a child who is 18, you're fleeing domestic violence, this child is still dependent on you, and you call a shelter for support and they say, well, you can't come with your male child, you're not going to leave. So Juliette's Place kind of broke, the sector tradition and said, you know what, if a male child is dependent on their mother, then they can come to the shelter. Okay. So the departments at Juliette's Place. So as I said, we're a house. There's 12 rooms in the house, but there are also offices for staff members. So the departments at Juliette's Place include the management, women's department, child and youth department, legal, outreach, facility and maintenance, and food service. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different departments. So the management department includes our executive director, who's Margaret C. Haynes, the manager of administration and finance, which is Jillian Lai, the program manager, which is Satina Ryan Bipat, and the manager of community engagement and fund development, which is myself. So management sees to the administration and overall operation of the shelter. The women's department. So the women's department is the main hub of Juliette's Place. This is where the majority of the services are offered. And the women's department does everything. They do the supportive counseling, information and referrals, housing support, case management, safety planning, which is huge when women are going back into the community. And they also do therapeutic counseling, the programs that women partake in. The children's department. So the children's department pretty much does everything that the women's advocates do, but with the children and the youth. So they do the therapeutic programming and counseling as well, but they also do school registrations. They try and get children into daycare. They liaison with Children's Aid and Public Health. And they supply the needs for the babies and the children in the house. So clothes, bottles, diapers, baby food, etc. Legal and outreach. So the legal department assists women with all of their legal needs. So they do referrals to the appropriate lawyers. They help them fill out legal documents. They help them apply for legal aid. And again, they just provide legal support. The outreach department takes care of the residents when they leave the shelter. So we never want the women or children to feel that once they've left the shelter, they are alone. So the outreach worker, if the women want to stay connected with us, will stay connected with them. There is ex-resident support group, there's an annual picnic, and there's also a holiday party. Ex-residents, we have a food bank at Juliette's Place, and ex-residents are always able to come and get food when they need it. We have the facility and maintenance coordinator. So basically, in regards to the shelter, so the building itself, this person is in charge of. So if there's any repairs that need to happen, or if anything needs to be ordered, or if there needs to be any renovations, this person would coordinate that. The food service worker prepares lunch and dinner for residents from Monday to Friday. They are in charge of ordering all the food, supplies, and they do the grocery shopping for the shelter. Any questions?
Oh, yes. We've got lots of questions. All right. So our first question is, are there repeat visitors? Like, do you see women coming back?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't remember what the stat is, but women will come multiple times before they have left the abuser for good. So I know in my time as a frontline worker at Juliette's Place, I've seen numerous repeat clients. Absolutely.
And are there resources available for the abusers or children of abusers to learn how to handle their tension?
There are programs, not that we give for the abusers, but there are programs that abusers can enter into through the criminal justice system, where they can do anger management programs. They can do programs where they learn about domestic violence in terms of power and control, and how to seek the supports that they need.
And how long can the women and children stay at Juliette's Place? I think this has sort of changed with COVID too.
Yes.
So probably that's a two-part question, maybe.
It is. So different shelters are mandated for and are funded for different lengths of stay. So Juliet's Place is mandated as an emergency shelter. So that's right when a woman is fleeing domestic violence, they come to Juliet's Place. So for those reasons, we are funded for a 3-month stay. So during those 3 months, we really try to support the woman in all of her goals that she wants to accomplish. So if she wants housing, we help her with that. If she wants counseling, like long-term counseling, if she needs legal support, or she wants to go back to school, or she wants to get a job, we will assist her with that. Because of COVID, women have been staying longer. And that's because, you know, one, in Toronto, there's virtually no affordable housing for women and children. And when women are looking for said affordable housing, a lot of landlords are not wanting to have people come into their home to view units. So that's definitely a barrier. So even though we have a 3-month stay, we are seeing women who are staying 5-6 months.
Okay, now here's a question on your cycle of abuse. It's a calm question. I've known many abusive situations, and I find it hard to know when abusers have truly changed their ways. I find talk is cheap. When they say they've changed and also bribe their victims with gifts, but I believe the victims can't fall for these tricks and look for actions, and their abusers make the indicated change in them as taking place. In other words, actions speak louder than words. Are there some actions that abusers do that indicate that they're changing their ways?
Really, a really good question. I would say that abusers who recognize that they have been abusive, and they really see the effects that it has had on their wife or their partner, and they commit to changing, is when the change will occur. So they've recognized what they've done. They have committed to not doing that again. And that action piece, right? Action does speak louder than words. That action piece where they go and seek counseling, or they remove themselves from the home and say, you know what, I want to do better. And in order to do better, I'm going to leave. I'm going to get the counseling that I need. I'm going to do anger management. I'm going to seek out supports so that I don't hurt you again, is when that change can occur.
They begin to take responsibility for their actions,
That
and they
ownership.
actually get ownership and do that.
Yeah.
Our next question is, do the children go to school when they're at Juliette's Place? Or do they go to a local school? Do they go back home to school where they used to live? What happens with the children with school? Non-COVID times, right?
Yeah, so
For now.
non-COVID times. So what happens is it's a conversation that we have with the women who come, the mothers who come to Juliette's Place. Because one thing that we don't want to do is take away her right to parent. So, you know, we will talk to them about safety. Generally, what we do is we will transfer the children to our neighborhood school. That way they are not at the old school. There's no risk of the abuser picking up the children. So we transfer them to our neighborhood school. If the mother has said, I don't want to do that, I want to keep them at their old school, then we will safety plan with them to hopefully ensure that herself and their children are safe. It does get a bit complicated when the child is older. So especially a high school student, it's very hard to transfer to another high school when you're mid-semester. So again, it's that safety planning to ensure that they are safe and that their needs are going to be met.
And how do you keep the location of Juliette's Place unknown to the abusers? What are the things you do? Or are you going to talk about that later? Or?
So how do we keep the location from the abuser?
Mm-hmm. So people don't know sort of where the shelter is and that the woman's and children are there.
So when the women come, we do safety planning, and a part of that safety planning is talking about that technology piece. Turning off the supports that, like in your phone, there's like a GPS system. It's like find your phone, and people can actually find you, or maybe you don't know, but people can actually find you from your phone. So turning off that piece so that the abuser can't track your phone. Talking about safety in terms of, for example, using your debit card. Many women have joint accounts with their abuser. And if you go to, let's say, the local Walmart and you use that debit card, then the abuser knows that you were at that Walmart and can possibly know which community you're in. So doing that piece, and also talking to women about safety and talking to women about confidentiality. So not letting the abuser know, even in those, calming moments where they are, not letting people that you don't trust know where you are. Or not letting, taking pictures of, landmarks in the community and stuff like that.
And regardless of gender, what's the maximum age for children to stay with the mother?
I don't think we have an age, to be honest. I've seen daughters with their moms who were 30 years old. Who, were still dependent on their mom. Maybe they were living at home and going through university or college or whatever the case may be, but we're still dependent. We don't really cap an age.
Okay. And where does your funding come from?
So our funding, Juliette's Place is not a city-run shelter. So there are shelters that are run by the city and predominantly get money from the city of Toronto. We are not a city-run shelter. There are also shelters that get funding from United Way. We are not a United Way shelter. So we do get majority of our funding from the Ministry of Social Services, Children's Services. We get a little bit of funding from the city of Toronto, but predominantly our funding is through fundraising.
That's where you come in.
That is
as the manager of community engagement.
No pressure, Simone, no pressure.
Can safe family members and friends visit women and children? Like if they've been deemed safe, can they come in?
No, unfortunately. So when we always want the women and children at Juliette's Place to, of course, stay connected to their family that they trust and that are supportive, but there are no visitors that are allowed at Juliette's Place. That's of course to protect not only the woman and child or children, but also everyone else in the shelter.
Okay, so what happens on Saturdays and Sundays? We all heard you say Monday to Friday, there's someone there doing the meals. So what happens on Saturday and Sunday?
No one eats. No, I'm kidding. So,
free for all. Leftovers.
So on Saturday and Sunday, the women's advocates, so those amazing women I said that really run the shelter, they make the breakfast and they make the lunch. And currently we have received a bit of funding for COVID relief. So we are getting dinners delivered for dinner.
Do you partner with other shelters if there is no room in your facility, or if another location would be safer for them?
Yes, absolutely. So for example, if an abuser has found a woman, which has happened, we transfer the woman immediately for safety. So we would call another shelter far away from ours and say, and of course, far away from the address that the woman was at previously. And we would say, you know, do you have space for a woman and a 3-month-old? The abuser found her at the local Walmart and followed her. We need to transfer her immediately. So if the shelter has space, then we would safely send the woman by cab to the new shelter.
Okay. And is there a typical or average duration that you see? Like, is there sort of, I know you said it's usually about 3 months, but is that the norm, or?
I'm going to say that 4 months is the norm. You know, pre-COVID, when we would be filling out applications for women to receive supportive housing, usually women were getting offers for housing at the 4-month mark. So I'd say that women were staying about four months. Yeah.
Okay. And is there a strong partnership with police to ensure safety? How does that come into it?
I would say that our local police division is pretty good at supporting us. And when we call them, getting out to us immediately because they know the nature of our work.
I think we can go on to the next module now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That was all amazing questions. So in the spirit of fundraising, we have events for Juliette's Place. So we have the Juliette's Place Gala, which actually hasn't happened for a number of years. It was supposed to happen last year, but COVID happened, so that didn't happen. We have the Dance for Hope, which is a dance-a-thon that I actually created for Juliette's Place 5 years ago. Of course, we couldn't have that last year, so it became Stay Woke for Hope, which was a 12-hour no sleep challenge. We have Celebrity Server Nights, where we partnered with our local Boston Pizza, where staff at Juliette's Place became servers, and we received a percentage of the night's, the bills from the night. All right, ways to get involved. Of course, volunteering. So I am in the process of revamping our volunteering campaigns with Juliette's Place. I don't think that we have enough volunteers, and I truly believe that volunteers are the heart of an organization. So I'm trying to revamp our volunteer catalog. So bear with me if you want to volunteer. Definitely need you, definitely want you, but I'm starting from the ground up. So these are some of the things that volunteers can do at Juliette's Place. Office assistant, shelter assistant, helping in the children's program, fundraising assistant, donation room. And if you're interested in volunteering, then you can email us at info@juliettsplace.ca. We also have student placement. We kind of stopped it for a bit because of COVID, but we always have students coming in from various college and university programs wanting to do their placement. Donations. So our mission is not an easy task to accomplish, given that every year the cost of providing essential services continues to escalate. Juliette's Place depends on support and generosity of businesses, corporations, and individuals to assist us in providing quality service to our clients. So there's different ways to donate to Juliette's Place. There's different links, and of course there are, if you're giving a monetary donation, then we can give a charitable tax receipt. Okay, so overcoming abuse doesn't just happen. It takes positive steps every day. Let today be the day you start to move forward. Okay, and we're at the end. So if there's any more questions, please feel free to ask. But the contact numbers, so the phone number, that's the phone number to the crisis line. The generic emails, info@juliettsplace.ca. We also have Instagram, so Juliette's Place Shelter, Facebook, Juliette's Place Shelter, and Twitter at JP Shelter TO. Okay, and that's it. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I am here to answer any more questions that you may have.
Anyone have any more questions? Thanks, Simone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today on a Sunday morning.
Oh, my pleasure. It was fun.
So Emily and I are joining together to create a two-part drive for Juliette's Place. Because of the province-wide lockdown of the stay-at-home order, we've had to adjust how we plan to do the drive. I'm currently doing an Avon Daily Needs drive. So to participate, you just send me an e-transfer, write a check, or donate cash, and I will purchase products on your behalf at my cost, have them delivered here to the house, and then I take them directly to the shelter to ensure maximum safety, minimum contact. Because as Simone was saying, and I didn't know this before, but they have to go to the store and buy all the things for the shelter. They've got to go over and buy it. It's not like it comes in for them. So it's help keep the staff safe too. So I'm getting things like toothpaste and shower gels and foot creams and moisturizers and lip gloss, all kinds of things like that, so they can stock up, and then it will be there. And I'm going to be at the church again on Wednesday, May 5th, between noon and 1:30 to do the Good Food program. So if anyone wants to drop anything off to me at that time, I'll be there. And Simone has a wish list, and we're going to update this and present it when it's safe for all of us to go back into the stores again. So I will keep that going, on an ongoing basis as Simone has needs, so that you know. Please keep in mind that any items you wish to donate need to be new. So new items are critical now during COVID and moving forward. So this would include, say, white pillowcases or something they need, but they have to be new white pillowcases. That's just one example. Now, Emily is conducting a drive for feminine hygiene products, which are also needed. And this will be more of a continuation of the current drive for Mother's Day. She will begin her promotion in May, and she'll present the details when the stay-at-home order is lifted. and then we can go back to the stores again. We'll have a drop-off later in May when it's safe to do so. However, once again, feel free to drop off these types of products to me on May 5th at the church when I'm there with the good food. I can take them from your car and put them directly into my car. One of the questions I have been asked is the family would like e-transfers or she'd like the products. And at this time, we'd say the products are the key thing, all right? So again, that part will be in May. And thanks very much. You can contact me at janesmythe@sympatica.ca. I'm on the contact list at church. And stay tuned next month when Marilyn Tankard will invite a children's author to join us, and more details to follow for next month's outreach.
That's great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, thanks for joining us. And as I said, we're trying to do some different things, and we'll continue to do so. I have a couple messages here. Everyone's saying thank you.